The lake was so still that night, it felt like it was holding its breath. I sat at the edge of the wooden dock, my bare feet just grazing the surface. Soft ripples spread out beneath the silver glow of the moon, perfect little circles in the dark water. Nearby, Dylan was unpacking our kayak, and I could hear his laughter mixing with Laura and Chris arguing over who forgot the paddles. Typical. The air smelled of pine and damp soil, with just a faint hint of smoke from our campfire crackling a few yards away. It should have been perfect. "Come on, Em," Dylan called out, his voice cutting through the quiet. Before the fog rolls in, I managed a small smile and carefully stepped into the kayak, the old wood groaning under my weight. The water reflected the moon like polished glass, but there was something unsettling about it. It was too perfect, too still, as if the lake itself were watching us, waiting. The locals had a name for it, Marrow's Hollow. They said it was bottomless, with strange currents that could drag boats down without a single warning. I'd laughed it off when I first heard the stories, dismissing them as old-time folklore. But now, out here, under that pale, lonely moonlight, the silence felt heavy, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. We paddled toward the center of the lake, our laughter echoing across the vast, dark water. The surface rippled softly under our oars, and the steady hum of crickets from the shore was the only other sound. It was peaceful for a moment. Then, without any warning, the moon's reflection on the lake began to distort. The light didn't just tremble. It rippled outward, pulsing with a life of its own. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Chris, ever the skeptic, turned his flashlight toward the water, its beam cutting a sharp cone into the endless black. "Probably just fish," he said, trying to sound casual, but his voice was a little tight. But the pulse came again, and this time it was brighter, more defined. An unnatural green glow pulsed from just beneath our kayak. Laura leaned over the side to get a better look, her dark hair falling across her face and brushing the water's surface. "That's not fish," she said, her voice dropping to a hush. "It looks like it's breathing." The light expanded again, a slow, rhythmic heartbeat in the depths. And for a split second, I swear I heard something else, a sound like faint whispers rising from below. The words were garbled, drawn out, as if filtered through 100 feet of water. Then, one of them said my name, clear as day, "Emma." I froze, my blood turning to ice. The others were looking at me, their faces pale in the moonlight. "Did you say something?" Dylan asked, his paddle still. I could only shake my head. "No, it wasn't me." Suddenly, a piercing scream ripped through the night. It was Laura. Her hand shot out of the water, splashing violently. "Something touched me," she shrieked, her eyes wide with terror. Chris grabbed her wrist, trying to pull her back into the boat, but she screamed again, this time louder, a raw sound of pure panic. The kayak tilted sharply to one side. In a flash of flailing limbs and a sickening splash, Laura was gone, pulled into the black water. "Laura," I screamed, fumbling for the flashlight and pointing it at the spot where she'd disappeared. But there was nothing, only the strange green shimmer under the surface, which flickered for a moment and then went completely dark. Without a second thought, Dylan dove in after her, a dark shape vanishing into the blackness. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. The seconds stretched into an eternity. All that was left was our kayak, bobbing silently, the moon's reflection trembling with each small wave that lapped against its side. Chris's voice was a choked whisper beside me. "We need to go back. Now." And then, we heard it. Dylan's voice, echoing from across the lake. It was soft, distorted, wrong. "Emma, help me." I spun around, trying to pinpoint the sound, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once, stretched and warped. Then Laura's voice joined his, a ghostly chorus whispering my name, over and over and over. The water around us began to glow again, not just a pulse this time, but a network of glowing green veins, spreading out in every direction like a spiderweb. And from the deepest, darkest part of the lake, a shape began to rise. It was huge, smooth, and impossibly pale, like skin stretched taut over bone. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't an animal. It was nothing I had ever seen or could have ever imagined. A single, colossal slit opened in the center of the shapepan. The moon's reflection vanished. It hadn't been the moon I'd been seeing on the water all night. It was an eye, a massive, watching eye. I screamed as the kayak flipped, throwing me into the abyss. Ice-cold water flooded my lungs. I kicked and clawed, my survival instinct taking over, fighting my way toward the surface. When I finally broke through, gasping for air, everything was gone. No boats, no friends, no sounds. Just me, alone in the water, with my own terrified reflection staring back, illuminated by that hellish green glow from below. Hours later, I staggered onto the shore and collapsed beside the dying embers of our campfire, shaking uncontrollably. A park ranger found me the next morning barefoot, soaked to the bone, and whispering to the empty air. The official story is that I was the sole survivor of a tragic accident. But I know the truth. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I go back to the lake, and when I look into its still, dark surface, I see the moon, and it blinks. And from the shore, I blink back. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Merrow's Hollow. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales from the shadows, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you think was watching from the depths. Until next time, stay safe and maybe think twice before you go for a midnight swim. Emma was never one to believe in the supernatural. She was logical, grounded, and rational to a fault at least. That's what her friends used to say. But after that camping trip by the lake, something changed in her. She couldn't explain it, but the nights started to feel longer, the shadows deeper, and the silence when it came felt heavier than before. A month after the lake incident, she had returned to her quiet suburban neighborhood. Life seemed normal again. She had a job as a freelance artist, a cozy apartment, and her cat, Juniper, who often watched the windows at night as if expecting someone to arrive. Emma tried to forget that night at the lake. The gash on her ankle now, a pale scar, the faint memory of claws slipping beneath the surface. But one thing wouldn't leave her alone. Every night at precisely 3:03 a.m., her phone would light up, no ringtone, no message, just the bright blue glow of the screen coming to life. The first few times, she ignored it. Then one night, curiosity, when she unlocks the phone, expecting to find nothing. But the flashlight flicked on by itself and the camera app opened. Her own face stared back at her, terrified and confused. Behind her reflection, in the dark window, there was something standing in the fog outside her apartment. A faint silhouette with eyes that gleamed like silver coins. Emma froze. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The light went out. When she looked again, the window was empty, just a reflection of the street lamp outside. The next day, she convinced herself it had been a trick of the light. Stress, lack of sleep, or maybe her imagination had finally snapped. She laughed about it to a friend Noah over lunch, pretending it didn't shake her. He told her it was probably a raccoon, but deep down, she knew it. WASN, single quotes T. 2 nights later, she woke to Juniper, hissing. The cat stood at the foot of her bed, tail puffed out, staring toward the hallway. Emma sat up and listened. There was a faint scraping sound, like nails dragging lightly against the wall. She turned on her bedside lamp. The sound stopped. The apartment was still. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear the blood in her ears. She got out of bed slowly, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. She crept down the hallway toward the front door. The scraping returned, louder this time. She followed it to the window by the door and peeked out. The fog was thick outside, blanketing the street, swallowing the lamplight. And then, through that mist, she saw it. A figure standing motionless at the edge of her driveway. Too tall. Its limbs seemed slightly wrong, like they bent at the wrong angles. And even through the fog, she could see the shimmer of its eyes again. She whispered to herself, "This isn't real." Then it moved, not walking, but gliding, slowly, straight toward her door. Emma stumbled back, slammed the deadbolt, and ran for her phone. She dialed Noah, hands trembling. He picked up on the second ring. "Emma, it's like 2:30. What's wrong?" "There's someone outside my house," she whispered. pressing herself against the wall. He's tall. I think it's the thing from the lake. The lake. Emma. That was weeks ago. It's probably before he could finish. The sound came again. Not from outside. From inside. The scraping was now coming from the living room wall. Long. Dragging. Deliberate. Emma dropped the phone and ran into her bedroom, locking the door behind her. She could still hear Noah's voice on the phone, calling her name. She backed up to the far corner, trembling. The sound moved from the wall to the floor. A creak, then another. Something was walking. Juniper jumped onto the dresser, fur raised, and stared toward the door. Her hiss turned into a low growl, then silence. For several long minutes, there was nothing. Emma waited, every breath shallow, every muscle locked. She finally gathered the courage to grab her phone again. Noah was still shouting. She lifted it, whispering, "It's in my house." The last thing she heard before the line cut out was a low, guttural voice, not Noah's echoing, from the other end of the call. A voice that rasped, "You brought me home." The phone went dead. When the police arrived in the morning, Emma's apartment door was wide open. Her phone was found on the floor, still recording. The footage showed only a few seconds of Emma whispering into the camera, eyes wide with terror, before a long hand with gray skin reached from the darkness and covered the lens. No trace of Emma was ever found, only the faint prints of something wet leading from her hallway to the open window. Liam had always loved the wilderness. As a wildlife sound engineer, his work involved capturing the hidden music of nature, wind, crickets, owls, and the haunting echoes of wolves at night. But nothing he'd recorded before prepared him for the sound he discovered deep within. Black Hollow Forest. He'd first heard about the area from a missing persons report. A woman named Emma, a local artist, had vanished from her apartment weeks earlier. Her last known location, according to police data leaks online, was near the outskirts of the same forest. Most people ignored the case, but for Liam, whose work often overlapped with strange environmental occurrences, something about the timing caught his attention. Around that same period, his weather radar had picked up a recurring subsonic frequency from the woods, a low, pulsing vibration that didn't match any natural sound known to science. He arrived at the forest just after sunset, parking his old Jeep by the dirt road. The air was heavy with mist, and the trees loomed like ancient guards. He set up his microphones, placing one near the edge of a stagnant pond and another deep within the trail. As night fell, the woods seemed to breathe with life. The rustle of branches, the distant hoot of an owl, and the faint whisper of wind slipping through the canopy. At exactly midnight, the strange frequency began. It wasn't a sound you could hear with your ears. It was something you felt in your bones. A slow, rhythmic pulse, deep and wet, like a heartbeat coming from underground. Liam adjusted his headphones and checked his readings. The signal was too consistent to be natural. It rose, dipped, and repeated, almost like a coded message. Then, through the static, a voice bled into the audio. A woman's voice, faint, trembling, repeating one phrase, "You brought it here." Liam's stomach turned cold. He froze, staring into the darkness. The voice wasn't coming from his speakers. It was echoing from the woods themselves. He grabbed his flashlight and turned toward the sound. "Hello? Who's there?" Silence. Then, another whisper. "Closer now. Please, make it stop growing." Liam's light caught movement near the pond. At first, he thought it was a reflection. Then the shape rose from the water, slowly, deliberately. It was tall, nearly twice his height. Its body slick and gray, with eyes that glowed faintly, like molten glass. Water poured from its limbs as it stepped forward. But what made Liam's blood run cold wasn't the creature's face. It was what hung from its shoulders. A torn piece of fabric, once part of a white shirt, and on it, a faint smudge of purple paint. Emma's paint. Liam stumbled back, fumbling for his camera. The creature moved closer, tilting its head, its mouth opening slightly as if trying to mimic human speech. From deep within its throat came the same phrase he'd heard before, but this time, warped and wet. "You brought me home." Liam turned and ran. Branches tore at his clothes as he sprinted toward the trail. Behind him, the creature moved fast, its footsteps heavy, its breathing uneven, almost human. He tripped, crashing into the dirt, his recorder still rolling beside him. Then, the forest fell silent. No birds, no wind, just that heartbeat sound beneath the ground, louder than before. The soil trembled, small cracks opened, oozing black water, and from within that muck, smaller shapes began to rise, gray hands, twitching, pulling themselves free. There wasn't just one creature, there were many. Liam scrambled to his feet, clutching the recorder, and bolted for his Jeep. He didn't stop until he hit the main road. Once inside the car, he pressed play on the recording, hoping to prove to himself that what he'd seen wasn't real. The playback began normally, forest sounds, then static, then the pulse, dot, and then the voice's own. "Don't listen," it said. "It learns when you listen." The recording cut off. Liam looked up, confused and terrified. The trees outside were still. Then, in his rearview mirror, he saw something standing at the edge of the road. A tall figure, dripping, watching. Its eyes glowed faintly, like twin stars behind fog. The next morning, hikers found his Jeep abandoned, the door open, and his recording equipment scattered across the ground. The only thing left playing was the final loop of audio, a faint whisper, repeating endlessly, "Tell them to stop digging. It's not dead. It's waiting."